Hey, thanks for stopping by. My name's Thomas, and this is Zarbo Audio Projects. As you probably saw in the thumbnail, this video is about something that we all use in DIY audio: screws. In this hobby, we use screws mostly for mounting speaker drivers and preamp faceplate units, crossover boards, terminal cups, stuff like that. I wanted to make this video in part because I sometimes see videos on YouTube where someone will use a screw in a way that, in my opinion, maybe isn't the best way to do it, or possibly just not how I would do it. I realize much of this comes down to personal preference or just using what you have on hand, and that's fine. I'm not saying that my way is the right way and that they're wrong, but I thought I would share some of my thinking on what types of screws should be used for various applications and why. First off, I have to say that I'm one of those people that hates it when I need a screw for a project and I don't have it on hand. That's why I've amassed a pretty decent supply of lots of various screws. If you've been an audio DIYer for any length of time, you probably have quite a screwy collection of them as well. Well, let's look at some of the most common sizes that I tend to use, and I'll talk a bit about their typical implementation. Just wanted to give you a real quick run through of some of the different screw sizes that I have. I'll start with one that's pretty obscure that really hardly gets used. I've used this once to mount a driver that I had cut the frame of the driver up. It was just a weird situation. See if I can find a picture of that for you. But that's a number 2 screw, 1/4 inch long. Get these a little closer. You can see that's tiny. That's hardly going to be used at all in speaker building and stuff like that. This is a number 2. This is one that I do use a fairly good deal of the time. Number 2 screw. It looks like it's tiny. It looks like it doesn't have any holding power, and it doesn't really need to. The kind of stuff you usually use this for are the real tiny speakers, or maybe those preamplifier boards that have the really tiny little holes. This here, it's a number 4 screw. This one's a 1/2 inch long. It's a panhead screw. It's got a black oxide finish, and this one here is a number 4 also. That's 3/4 inch long. I'll just put that out rather than put both of them out. This is a number 6 screw here. Number 6 by 1 inch long, panhead screw, black oxide finish. That is the go-to screw when you're a speaker builder. That is the screw for most tweeters. It's the screw for most woofers. So if you have one screw for building speakers, if you can only afford one, pick up the number 6 screw, and 1 inch long is a good length, because it just basically means if you're using thinner material, you have more of it sticking out. Here we got the number 8 inch screw, 1 inch long. This one is the one that I use for larger speakers, say 6 inch woofers up to maybe 12 and 15 inch woofers. This is the big screw. They sell a number 10. Parts Express I don't think sells that, or didn't. I don't really use that. I use this for the most part, and this does the job. This is a number 6, a 3/4 inch long flathead screw with a black oxide finish. You notice this one has sort of a coarser or more aggressive thread pattern. This one, I think Meniscus sent me some of these. Thank you, Meniscus. This here is a number 8, 1 inch long black oxide screw, and I bought this specifically to mount the Dayton Reference Series tweeter. It fit pretty good, as you'll see. This is an M3 by 16 millimeters long socket head screw. That's a pretty small one. This one is an M3 too, but that's a stainless look. So you know, whatever floats your boat with that. I'll put one of these, if I can get it out, by here so you can kind of see the size. Pretty small, but useful. Like everything's useful when you need it. You need it. This one here is a little beefier. This is a 3.5 by 25 millimeter black oxide socket head screw. You see the profile of that, what the head looks like. It's flat on the bottom. It's similar to the regular panhead screws on the bottom. It's just the top's more barrel shape, and it's got a little bit more of a decorative, industrial, rough, manly looking finish on it. This is an M4 by 35 millimeter long black oxide socket head screw. Again, these socket head screws, they take the Allen key or Allen head or whatever they're called. They probably have another name. And the biggest one of these that I have is a M5 by 30 millimeter long black oxide socket head screw. That one's pretty beefy. For this one, you could probably do the 15, 18-inch woofers if that ends up being the right screw size and dimension for something that big. But that's pretty beefy. That doesn't get used for much. I don't even know if I've used this yet at all. Well, as you can see, I have a pretty large assortment of screws here. We're going to run through these and sort of look at which screws might be used for which applications. But when we're thinking about what type or size of screw to use for a particular application, the best advice that I can give you is to look at what you're trying to mount. In this case, we're looking at a Dayton Reference Series tweeter here. This is a really nice looking tweeter, but if we can see, we have 4 mounting holes here, and the holes do not go straight in. They are tapered, which tells you that they are designed to take a tapered flathead screw to mount it with. So let me take this number 8 screw here and put one of those in the hole, and you can see that that fits just about perfect. It feels basically flush to the front of it, and that's what we want. We want these screws to be as flush as possible to minimize diffraction. Now let me take a number 6 screw here, try that one out just for comparison. Well, that doesn't look bad. Some people might like that. It's a little too recessed, a little too small for my tastes, so I think I'd probably go with this number 8. That looks to me about perfect. So in this case, if you look at the device that you're trying to mount, it basically tells us what type of screw we need to use. Now in contrast, take this tweeter here. This is a peerless tweeter, and pretty well respected tweeter. It's a DX20 BF, and it has a plastic mounting flange, and it is much smaller than the Dayton. But we notice that the screw holes are different. On the Dayton, they are tapered, and on this peerless, the actual through holes are straight, but there is a recess that's larger. So that tells me that it's made to be mounted with a panhead screw, something like this. Now that's a number 6, black oxide number 6, and I think that's probably the right screw to use for that. Let me just pop in a number 8 just to see if that looks better or worse. It's a little snug. Yeah, that doesn't quite, that recesses, it fits in the recess okay, but to me it looks a little bit big. So if I were making this choice, and I soon will be, I would use this number 6. And you see 2 different tweeters, 2 different materials. You have 2 different methods of mounting. Now I'll just say this, with this being aluminum and very sturdy, you could drive this screw in fairly well, and you don't have to worry about the plastic splitting because it's aluminum. If you were to have this same tapered on this thin plastic, then you would have to be a little more careful, because if you look at the shape of the screw, it's basically a wedge. It's trying to, as it goes in, it's basically wanting to push the hole apart, and you could very easily split the mounting hole here, because if you look, the distance between the edge of the speaker and the hole is very thin, and being plastic, you could very easily split it. So they wisely used a mounting system that is designed to use a panhead screw, as opposed to this aluminum, which is much stronger, which is designed to use a tapered flathead screw. Just for actually a really good comparison, we got 2 binding post terminals here. Same thing. They look very similar. They're different. This is a Dayton Audio one, and this one here I think I bought at the tent sale. This was $1 each. These are really cheap. They're not quite as nice, but just if we look at the mounting detail, we can see on this one that it has a tapered hole. So let me take this number 6, for example. That looks about right. Oh yeah, that is just about perfect. The screw sits almost flush, and to me that looks nice. That looks right. I actually used one of these terminal cups on the Harmonious Table radio build I did, and I think I lined all the screw X's on the Phillips screws all in line, and I made a little joke about that. But this one uses a different method. This one uses a recessed and a straight hole to go with, say, probably a number 6 screw. Yeah, that looks about right. So you got a number 6 screw here. We could try a number 8 screw just to see what that looks like. And that doesn't quite fit into the recess, so that would not be the right screw to use in my opinion. So you kind of see what I'm saying here. I have a lot of screws, but you need a lot of them if you do this stuff, because you need to have enough variety so that you have the right screw for the job. So these are binding posts, or terminal cups I should say. Here's like a binding post. This is a big mama. This thing's huge. This has a recessed one as well. That one, that's pretty beefy. Maybe you try a number 8, see if that would fit. I think that's probably what I would use, because that looks, this is beefy, and a number 8 screw has a little beefy of a look, a little more beefy of a look than a number 6. That's a number 6. So either one, or you could go with one of these socket head screws. They look pretty mean looking too, and that has a more of a mechanical machine, kind of an industrial look to it, which I like. You go with either one of those, but this is not something you would likely go with a tapered head screw, because that just, it doesn't fit right. Probably not going to look right. And if I put this in there, you can see it works, but there is a gap, and you do not want that gap if you're trying to make things look really nice and neat. You want to try to use the very best screw that you can for the situation. So there's some detail into this, and it's not just as easy as throwing any old screw in, although you can. If that's all you have, that's all you have, and that's fine. But if you spend a little time, effort, and energy trying to make sure that you have just the right screw to match up for your situation, it can look a little bit nicer in my opinion. Now let's take a detour and move over to some preamplifier faceplate boards. I have a couple of different ones here. And 2 different ways again of doing the same thing. This is a plastic faceplate. It's fairly thick, about 1/8 of an inch or so. And if you look, if I can hopefully get zoomed in well enough, you'll see that there is a straight through hole and then there is a recess. This looks like, let me try number 6. See if my guessing game, if my guessing mojo is working. Let's see. I should have a little screwdriver with me here to help me get these in there a little snug. Actually, this number 6 isn't quite sitting flush. So I'm guessing the number 6 is probably not the right one to use. Maybe let's try a number 4. Put that in there and see what that looks like. And yeah, I would say that looks pretty good. It seems to have enough space around it so it's not snugged in there, but it looks like it's the right screw for the job. Now this is one faceplate, again with a straight through hole and a recess to mount a flat bottomed panhead screw. This is another preamp, and this one has fairly thin steel, but it has tapered sides for a countersunk screw. Not a countersunk screw, a tapered side flathead screw. And I'll put this number 8 in there, and that doesn't look bad, but a little bit of it is sticking up, and I don't exactly like that. I would go, in this case, I would go probably with the number 6. And oh yeah, that fits just perfect. It's basically flush, and it looks like it was just made for it. So the difference is even between things that are basically kind of the same. If you look at the screw hole, the mounting hole that they give you, that will basically tell you, in most cases, what type of screw you need to use. This is a peerless passive radiator, 3.5-inch passive radiator. And it's got a stamped steel frame, it's sculpted. And even though it's sculpted, they did sculpt in the stamped steel, they did sculpt in some little recesses for the screw heads. So again, I'm playing a little guessing game here, but let me try a number 8, although I think a number 6 is probably better. So that's a number 8 in that screw hole opening. Here's a number 6. Right? To me, the number 6 looks a little bit better. It fits a little bit better. It doesn't cover up that little curve there, and it sits a little flatter in my opinion. This here, this number 8, it looks like it's a little bit too big for that space. You have different choices. Like you can have the shiny metal ones, the nickel ones, or you could have the black oxide ones. I'm a pretty plain and simple guy. I tend to like the black oxide screws. Here's a black oxide, here's a nickel silver. Now sometimes you want an accent and you want to spruce it up a little bit, but for the most part, I, myself, tend to like the black oxide. I'm sort of a minimalist with stuff like that. This is a 10-inch aluminum designer series, I think, passive radiator from Parts Express. And it's beautiful. It has 5 holes, 5 mounting holes. And the thing about this, and this is a little tangent, but this is what I love about Dayton Audio. They do these little things that you need, that it should have, like to make it right, and this is what they do right from the start. This has a gasket already on it, and it's a stamped steel frame, and it's sculpted. It looks nice. It doesn't need to be dressed up or anything. It looks almost like a cast aluminum frame, but it's stamped steel, makes it cheaper for them, and it still performs well. But what they did was they put this cardboard gasket all the way around it with the holes where the screws go through. And what that does is, when you drive a screw in, what it does is it means that it's much less likely to compress that metal and smush it down. So it's going to look better, and you're going to have a little more margin of safety when you fasten this down. But here's a number 8 pan head screw in there, and let me just put a number 6 in just so you can see the comparison. I don't know if this is boring for you, but I enjoy looking at this stuff because you look at it and you say, well, that doesn't look bad and that doesn't look bad. But there's a difference, and you can make a choice. You can say, well, I really like this look better than this look, so I'm going with this screw. If you only have one screw, you can't do that. If you have an assortment, then you can do that. You have choices. And for almost everything that I build, I look at the screws and I say, well, I don't want this one because that's a little too big or that's a little too whatever. I want this one instead. Now, to contrast this, that has this cardboard inset to help prevent crushing, we've got this Tangband W5 1138 SFM subwoofer driver that also has a stamped steel frame, very similar to the Dayton, although that was a passive radiator. But this does not come with the gasket, and it also does not come with that cardboard crush plate already installed. But same deal basically. You could go with a number 8 screw. This is a number 6. That's a number 8. I apologize. So let's move on to another couple of speakers, some smaller ones. This is the Tectonic. I can't remember the model number. I can put it up on the screen. But this is a sort of a different. It's a flat piston driver, and it has these little ears with little holes in it. I mean, it's really, I haven't used this yet. I put it in a test box, but it's challenging to mount this. It's a neat driver, but it's a little tough. So, you think of, I can't use a number 6 on this, maybe a number 4 screw. You're not going to use a number 4 screw. You might be able to if you drilled out the hole to make that fit, but to me that would weaken an already sort of weak mounting structure right there. So the thing that I would do, I would use this number 2. Now, I think most people don't have number 2 screws in their screw arsenal. I pick some up because I do use them for stuff like this. That barely fit through the hole. It's snug, and it looks about right on there. It's a tiny screw, but it looks about right, and that's what this needs to mount. It needs a number 2. Anything bigger just isn't going to work. And the thing too is when you're screwing this in, since this is very thin plastic and that ear has very little meat around it, around the screw hole opening, you got to be real careful with putting the screw in. You got to be real gentle, or that could easily crack. In comparison with that, we've got this Dayton DMA driver, which is one of Dayton's. They have these in all kinds of different sizes. They're a neat driver because they got square sides, but they got these roundovers on all of them that are perfect for using a 1/4-inch router bit with. And it's got a thicker plastic flange. It has a foam rubber on the back of it. This is my favorite sub 2-inch driver because this thing actually sounds pretty full in a small cabinet. It's really nice. I really do like this a lot. Made a few things with this. But again, we're looking at speaker holes, so check that out. We've got we have a screw hole that is straight through and then a recess. So I would not use a tapered head screw for that because that doesn't even fit in there, sorry. I would use let me guess, number 6 probably for this. Let me see, that's a number 6. Let me try a number 4, see if that looks a little better. Yeah, the number 4 is probably the one to use. The number 6, the head is a little bit too big to actually sit into that recess, so I don't think that would be the one that I would use. I think I would go with the number 4. So again, you have these screws on hand, and then you can make your best choice as far as what you think would look best. And what we would rather have is a screw that doesn't protrude and that sits as flush as possible, because that reduces diffraction effects. Now, I did play with this earlier, and I did notice that if I take this number 6 flathead screw with the tapered sides, it kind of fits in there basically perfect. It's totally flush. Now, I do like that look because it looks like it's totally flush. It fits perfect. Hopefully this is showing up all right. But the thing that I don't like is that this is a tapered head screw, and this is not designed for a tapered head screw. It's designed for a flat bottom pan screw, and I don't know if you try to crank this down, is it going to bury itself in or do some weird stuff, because the geometry of this, I should say, is not designed to accept this. But again, it does look really nice. So that would be one of those cases where I might try something that's not really designed for it, just to see if it would look good. Because in my mind, this actually looks a little nicer than this, although that does look fine to me too. But this, I might be tempted to give that a try and just see if that doesn't end up being a pretty cool little choice. So here we have a sort of a one-of-a-kind Dayton RS 180. This was like an early production model. It only has 4 screw holes as opposed to 6 that the normal one has. So this has pretty big openings here, and again, it's a straight through hole and then a recess. I'll put a number 6 in this, and yeah, that looks just about right to me. Putting a 4 in that one, too much wobble room. It's okay, but I think that the number 8 is probably the best choice there. To me, that looks the best. Now, just a word about using a screw that is fairly flush to the surface. You could use something like this, a cap head screw, but if you notice, that's sticking above the surface slightly. And let me see if, I don't know if this is going to be too big to fit in, but no, that fits too. That one sticks above the surface even more. This will cause diffraction. It will change the frequency response, not in a good way. It's not a big deal in some cases. In some cases, it's a little bit of a deal that you would really rather not do that. The smoothest surface you can get for your mounting screw, the smoother your frequency response will be, generally speaking. There was one speaker that I built, the Classic Tension Headaches. I described them as a speaker that a Klingon might build if he was a do-it-yourselfer. It's got some wild, swoopy shapes, and for that, I wanted sort of aggressive everything on it. I wanted aggressive mounting hardware and aggressive, angles and curves, and there's even some sharp creases and stuff. That was pretty challenging to build. It was even more challenging to not screw up all those sharp corners and stuff where the wood is. But for those, I used these bigger cap head type screws, and I just thought it went better with the whole motif of that thing, even though it did ding the frequency response just a little bit. But for that particular case, I think it was really worth it. Before I wrap this up, I want to speak briefly about how we get the actual screw driven into the material where it needs to go. It should go without saying, but you should always pre-drill your holes for your screws for whatever it is you're working on. And we call this a pilot hole. I see some YouTubers just driving in screws through the speaker into the bare wood without pre-drilling a hole, and in my mind at least, that's the wrong way to do it. There's a much greater chance of things slipping and causing damage to a driver when you do it this way, because you need to apply so much more pressure as you're screwing it in. Not to mention that you can get wood fibers into the cabinet this way, and those fibers might go places they shouldn't be, if you know what I mean. To do this right, you need an assortment of small drill bits. Just hold up the shaft of the screw you intend to pre-drill the hole for, and find a drill bit size that is basically the same size as the shaft of the screw. If you don't have that exact size, do a test of the next smaller size and see if that works okay. Better the pilot hole is a smidge too small than too large. We do need the screw threads to grip securely after all. I often use a wax bar to help the screw go in easier if it's feeling kind of snug. Don't worry, it won't back out on you if you do this. It just helps it go in a bit easier with less strain on the shaft of the screw. Screws can snap if they're stressed too much. I guess I should mention too how I fasten in screws on my various projects. You may have noticed that I tend to use a drill driver or one of these little powered screwdrivers to get the screw most of the way in. And then I switch to a hand screwdriver to finish it off. There's a good reason for that. Using a drill to drive in a screw on a speaker may seem more dangerous than using a screwdriver, but in reality you have more control of things if all you're doing is just applying constant downward pressure. One hand presses the switch to begin rotation, and the other hand keeps the shaft of the driver steady. And it's constant pressure. When you use a screwdriver to tighten a screw on a speaker, the amount of downward pressure basically stops each time you reposition your hand. So it's much easier for the screwdriver tip to come out of the screw face and go into a surround or a cone of a speaker, for instance. That's only happened to me twice in my lifetime, but it's never happened to me using a drill or a powered screwdriver. Another reason I power in the majority of the screw and twist by hand for the last turn or two is because you have a much better feel when you use your hand to drive in a screw as opposed to using a powered screwdriver. Most of the projects that I do are constructed of MDF, and that stuff is basically cardboard, and if you drive a screw in a bit too far, it can strip out the MDF fairly easily. This is especially true with smaller screw sizes. After you do this for a while, you'll get a feel for just how much torque you need to apply to each screw for the material that you're screwing into. And you'll have consistently snug speakers and terminal cups with no strip out of the wood fibers. Lastly, I want to address the fastener group that I didn't address: machine screws and blind nuts. You've probably heard of T-nuts. They look like this. For T-nuts, you drill a hole and you tap these into the back of the baffle, and then you use a screw with machine threads to tighten up the whole shebang. There are other types of blind fasteners that you can find as well. Parts Express sells a similar type called hurricane nuts. I've only needed to use a setup like this twice in my life. It's possible for larger 15 to 22 inch subwoofers, or even for smaller drivers with huge, extremely heavy magnets. You might need to go this route, especially for car audio applications, where the mounting points are constantly getting bumped and jarred. But honestly, for most, if not all, well-engineered home stereo builds, a good number 8 or number 10 screw of sufficient length will likely be good enough. Again, I'm showing you how I do things, and I'm giving you my reasons for why. Please don't be offended if you do things different. I'm not picking on you, I promise. The end result is what counts, and if you're happy with how your audio project sounds and looks, well, that's really all that matters. Well, I guess that's it. Thanks for watching my screwed up video, and I'll see you next time. Bye now. I gotta stop for a second. I just got a splinter, a metal splinter. Ouch.